It's 59 minutes after the hour. We have Mr. Fisher standing right by. Before we get to Mr. Fisher, I want to, what is the right etiquette for doing text messages? You know, I always say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening and mention things in there. But there's a lot of people that don't know how to write a simple hello. Now, what I'm getting at, if somebody send you a message and they reply back what you said, so you say, thank you, I appreciate that. Or do you go, okay, thanks? To me, okay, thanks is like whatever. That's how I look at it. Well, if somebody take the time out to write you, respond back as I would say professionally, because you never know who's going to look at that email or see things. So you really have to put yourself on that pedestal of being professional in anything that you do. Because when I text my family, I always say, good morning, Deborah. Or my friends, good morning, Glenn. I look at that and, that's the right, to me, that's etiquette that people forgot about these days. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Okay. Sorry, sir. I had to get that off my chest right there. Good morning, Fisher.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. They're telling me that they're not seeing you yet because I haven't switched it over yet. So let me go ahead and switch it over. Now we're better.
Okay.
Man, your bio is, I read that you have been almost like Lisa Stanfield, been around the world and all that, huh?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, no doubt. Absolutely.
And I love reading it because you have been in publishing for how many years?
This is my 42nd year. And yeah, I started way back during the when they had hot presses and newspapers ruled, and things have changed.
Yeah, because I remember I ran any printing press it was in the United States at the time, and everything was in print. And you talk about people bringing things in, I need this right away. Well, back in the days, you couldn't get it out that quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So things went from print, technology started changing with the internet.
Yeah.
The newspaper sort of faded away or advertising on that. And now everything is almost social media and everything is like that. So how was that transition for you when you transition from this to where we are today?
It was well, like an average individual, you kind of adjust where and when it's time to. Um, what challenged me and probably challenges a lot of old school publishers is, of course, the older you get, the more you get set in your ways. And it took us a while to come around to be convinced that newspapers, magazines would never again be the preferred method of people receiving information. We saw the digital thing coming. We're very much professionals, so we know how to anticipate trends and see things before they hit us. But we just couldn't be convinced that the digital age would dominate the way that it has. So it took some real humbling and just showing some vulnerability to be able to work with that. I've seen a lot. Again, I've been in the game so long. I've seen a lot of publishers come and go during that era or during the transition, and it's still kind of in its revolutionary stage, right? We haven't seen the end of all the stuff because AI is on the table now. But it took me a little while to really come around. But I'm still in the work world, and as a result, I had to get with the program. So I'm there now, but I'm always still learning, still growing, and still reaching.
Yeah, just like with radio, it changed so much from when I did it back in the days till now. We had vinyl. I mean, you go into a studio, there's a wall full of all vinyl. Then when CD came out, and I said, nobody's going to do that. Well, I had to get on board with that too. Yeah. Then it came out now with everything's on a flash drive, music. You don't carry all that around. I had to get on board. That was a struggle for me because I'm old school. And so, like you said, you have to come up with the times are changing. And What's scaring me right now is this AI that, I mean, they could put things on that's not even the truth. And that scares the mess out of me. People are more, put this way, when print was out, everybody read the facts. The facts was there. Reporting was different. Magazines were different because you read and you knew that were the facts. But you have to have what, two or three sources in order to publish it.
Right.
Now, nowadays, people listen to what somebody else said and they think that's the facts.
Yeah, I actually teach as well, or I'm not currently teaching, but taught for 4 years at a university locally here, which meant I had the privilege of training the new generation of journalists. And part of my lecture was always how social media changed the game. And one of the reasons that it did was anybody now could type up something, write up something that was just purely opinion. And all of a sudden they're an expert or an authority on that topic. No research, no real checking for accuracy and authentication. In the old school, again, the way I was trained in my journalism department, those things, you weren't even considered a professional until you checked those boxes, until you made sure, as you mentioned, everything you were putting in print, in writing, broadcasting was factual. You had to check two or three sources, you're right, to compare the three and make sure there was a consistency before you reported it.
Yeah, because nowadays people just everybody believe us on Facebook. It's the truth.
But,
It's the
yeah.
truth. And
Every,
when you do a facts check on that to find out, and then you tell the people that's not the truth, they still believe that.
yeah. Everybody's an author now with social media. Everybody's an authority. Everybody's a journalist. Everybody believes that their version, interpretation, perspective of a certain topic is legitimate. It's the right one. And it's not too difficult to grab a gang of followers who believe what you say simply because you said it. You
Yeah.
know, you're not necessarily an authority. They just decide, I want to follow him or her. And that's the way it works nowadays. I still believe fundamentally that because journalism is a very integral and business of equity and also integrity. And I believe that we will overcome a lot of that. I call it noise because it really, really is.
Yeah.
Uh, and the truth will always conquer and overcome untruth. So you still can't replace some of the real professional organizations that are out there reporting the truth and reporting the facts and the news on a regular basis.
Because back in the days, they were journalists out there, they would stay on the story for almost 6 months. It wasn't this instant gratification. I got to get it out there so I'll be known. They would stay on it for 6 months. I remember in school, I took journalism and I said, that's not me. I mean, I did it and I still focus on it to this day. And you stayed on the story for almost 6 months until you got the truth and got the meat of what's going on. Then you report it, and you catch people attention. They say, "I didn't know that was going on." It's almost like I got you. Here it is. This is what I've been doing for 6 months, and here's my story. We don't see that anymore nowadays as much.
No, the industry has changed, and even prior to social media, um, things like breaking news became because ratings at some point took over, right? Where you've got to be first with the story, you've got to be most sensational with the story. And so folks were starting to take shortcuts. And you're right, they could hear about something overnight, and before you know it, they had a story in the morning. They hadn't checked any resources, hadn't done any research, hadn't talked or spoken to the person or maybe individual that's at point or in the subject. And before you know it, they're reporting it because they had to get there first. And then again, social media just opened it up to the whole world. Now everybody can talk about a topic that they heard from someone else and gather a following.
Okay. I want to get into one part of your that I read about you, that you took a company, they made 90K to $1.2 million. How did you go about doing that?
And the truth is, appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
And that wasn't too difficult. So here's the backstory. In 1990, Black Enterprise magazine, which you may be familiar with, used to be kind of the Black professionals' Bible, if you will, or at least our technical manual for organizing and managing your career, Black Enterprise magazine. But it also talked about entrepreneurs as well. I also spent 26 years in corporate America before I stepped out on my own 18 years ago. But in 1990, I was hired by Black Enterprise magazine to open up the Western region for them. And the history of Black Enterprise magazine at that point for 20 years is they were purely an East Coast magazine. If you followed the content on it for any length of time, you'd see all the profiles were predominantly East Coast. All the folks that are being profiled were, up and down that Eastern corridor, maybe the Midwest, because Chicago was always a big city. But they gave no real credence to the West Coast. Well, I'm from California originally, and we knew we were trying to make some stuff happen out there. Were we as progressive as the East Coast, the Northeast specifically? New York, Jersey, Philly, Maryland, DC. Maybe not. However, we still were making some stuff happen. We had some large corporations that were based out there. So it took me a while to convince Mr. Graves, Sr., the original founder of the magazine, that there was real value to have in a Western regional presence. And it took a little while after, but once I was able to kind of convince him, or at least get him to take the leap of faith, we set up an office out there. I became the Western regional manager, and at that point, they had been maybe bringing in 90,000 in revenue from the West Coast, which was really just by phone calls and fax machines back then. Yeah. So I was able to walk up and down the state of California, go into Colorado and Utah and Nevada and Arizona, and shake some money out of some of the major corporations out there who were really not paying any attention to the whole Black progressive movement. And was successful in bringing in a couple $1 million in my time with them.
Wow. See, you talking about the Black Enterprise mag. I remember when I was growing up, we couldn't wait for Jet magazine to come out. And then we had Ebony magazine. That was our mainstay in reading things. And it was very informative. Now, me, myself, personally, in Jet magazine, like all young men back in the days, who's that lady's going to be in the centerfold? Then after that, I was always into music. So I went and looked on the back of Jet magazine to see what songs was popular. Right. And that was our way of getting information, us in the Black community, was those two magazines. And we look forward for that coming in. And I think Essence came in after that, if I'm right. I'm not too sure.
Yeah. Ebony, John Johnson, by the way, was the original founder and owner of Ebony magazine out of Chicago. And he then created, before Ebony magazine, it was called the Negro Digest. That's back when they were calling us Negroes. And then he ultimately came out with Jet magazine, which we used to refer to as a bathroom read. You picked it up at the barbershop. It was about the size of your hand. So, and it naturally fell to that centerfold. So you're right. It was the first thing we noticed. But once an innovator breaks into a market or an industry, other smart people start following along, paying attention, and realizing this same model can work for me. Maybe I'll focus on a different demographic. So Clarence Smith and trying to remember the other owner of Essence magazine, the original two, they decided to come up with a magazine that they niched it in the woman, the mature woman's demographic. I wouldn't even say mature woman, but I'd say progressive woman demographic, and that was Essence magazine. And then about 5 other magazines followed, and Black Enterprise came out in 1970. Essence was, I think, like 65, 66. So, yeah, the pioneer in the industry was John Johnson. He was the one that took the real brunt of the rejection and had to be a serious advocate and almost activist, almost radical at the time to continue to force this into industry and convince the globe that there was real value in the African American community. And if your favorite color was green, you were missing this opportunity. Go ahead and focus on Black folks. Even if you don't like them, go ahead. You know, we're buying Cadillacs and drinking a lot of liquor, and we love basketball shoes and clothes. So focus on us.
Because I remember that's where we found out a lot of Black products was in those magazines.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we were not introduced that in corporate America, for some reason. And if we were in a major supermarket chain, there was a little space over in the corner where you could buy Black beauty supplies and everything, but magazines, they did open up advertising for the Black products that we know as of today.
Yeah. What they really did back then, I'll tell you a quick story. I get asked at the time, I do some professional speaking. And I get asked often how I found myself in this industry, because I could still probably count on two hands the level of professional Black publishers in this country on two hands. And I don't mean a Black publisher of a Black publication, because our company now, we reach out and we do business with everybody. It doesn't matter what ethnicity or race or color. But I originally got into business because when I was a youngster, I grew up in the 60s. We only had 3 broadcast channels back then, black and white TV on top of the other colored TV that wasn't working.
Yeah.
the one with the hanger in it as an antenna. My dad controlled the TV. Now, we didn't have a remote control TV. He just controlled the TV. So if you didn't want to watch what he was watching, you either stayed outside and hung out with your buddies. But if you find yourself in trouble at all and you had to go on punishment, which is what we called it back then, I spent a lot of time in trouble for some reason. You had to figure out what to do while you were in your room. As a result, I became an avid reader early in my life, and I'm talking about probably prior to 5, 6 years old. I read everything. And again, the fact that we didn't have a lot of information coming in the house, 2 things we did have were 2 magazine subscriptions. One was Ebony magazine, which introduced me to people who looked just like me that were doing pretty well. And then National Geographic, which kind of really opened my world up it opened my zip code up to, boy, this is what's possible and colorful out in the world. But Ebony magazine, to your point, not only did it introduce you to products maybe that were uniquely designed for your hair, your facial texture and color, but it also, because content is always king in publishing, it introduced you to some people you would never really get to meet. And also, if you really read it, and I used to read it cover to cover, you would get some perspectives on topics that if you left it up to your public school to interpret that history to you, you would never get the truth. You would rarely get the truth. You needed to hear from someone who was African American, who was Black. And that's what Ebony did. Ebony brought through, even in the form of photojournalism. If you remember Gordon Parks, back when Ebony was a black and white magazine. You remember Life magazine back then? Those were all black and white magazines. Mm-hmm. But Gordon did such a phenomenal job with the Emmett Till profile that he gathered a real following. And he was a photojournalist. So he did as much writing, photography as he did writing. But you learned a lot about the truth about what was going on for our particular community through magazines back then.
Yeah, I remember those magazines. Oh boy, wonderful, wonderful. So how can one person become a publisher? Is there I'm pretty sure they have to go to school. You just can't jump up and say I'm gonna be a publisher. There's learning. So if one person want to become a publisher, let's say they're in high school right now, and that's their goal to become, how do they go about what class to take and what they need to do to become one?
Good question. So I often say that publishers are like nurses. They're called. Now, you can be born to do something else and just be fascinated with the business of journalism, in particular publishing, and get trained to become a publisher. There's a lot of people out there on the streets that call themselves publishers who really don't have the background. They really don't have the training. Some careers you choose, other careers choose you, right? So I believe this industry chooses a certain type of person, and that is a person who, and if you think of the anatomy of an author, of a book author, they typically are introverted people, um, kind of shy, passive folks who really have a lot to say but can't get their voice heard. So writing gives them the opportunity to tell their story, to dominate a crowd and be the loudest in the crowd because their book is speaking for them. A lot of journalists, and fundamentally, I'm a writer, like most journalists are. So I came out of college, journalism department, San Jose State University. And all I really wanted to do was write, because I'm that introverted kind of author I was telling you about. Back then, all I wanted was a cubicle and a typewriter. They had typewriters back then. And just let me go, report on some stories and put them in the paper. I was good with that. But God had a different plan. And again, not only did I start reading early at 6 years old and reading everything I could, we grew up in a very poor community. We didn't know it back then, but everybody was poor on the streets. However, my parents were smart enough, and I guess knew enough when I was in my 7 or 8 years old. We were fortunate enough to bring in a whole rack of encyclopedias in the house.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's when that was the next level, right?
Yes.
That's when the clouds really cleared. I read those encyclopedias cover to cover, and it was a beautiful thing. So ultimately, I went from being an avid reader to a pretty proficient writer, and then kind of stepped up from that to be a pretty good speller. I went to predominantly white public schools as a child, and I'd be the only black kid in the spelling bee. Never won, but I finished second a couple times. It's the same girl, by the way, Gina Shin. I'll never forget her. But she's probably running some major corporation nowadays. But a lot of publishers start off as writers, right? They really just want to write fundamentally. Maybe they were even an English major in college, and they got the training to learn how to write first. And then ultimately they got into the business of publishing. They liked what they saw. They felt real comfortable. They were pretty successful. And then they saw the food chain of how you could make more money and more money by going north, and you found yourself there. My story is a little unique because the truth is I was a huge beneficiary of affirmative action, huge. I came out in the 70s. Well, again, I came out of college in the early 80s, but by the late 80s, corporate America was on the hunt for African Americans, people of color, who could check some of the boxes, because they really were looking at equal opportunity back then, and not necessarily trying to level the playing field, but making sure that they didn't leave talent on the streets that could really help their bottom line. And if that and there was some emerging communities coming up. Ours was one, the African American community. So corporate America was looking for folks just like me, and I came up. Fortunately, got chosen to, lead a magazine, and then led 2 and 3, and then 6 and 7, and then became what's called a group publisher. That's the pinnacle title in corporate America publishing, is group publisher, which means you oversee a multitude of different titles of magazines or books. And then as I got to the very top of that in corporate America, I got to the age where I didn't believe in laughing when it ain't funny anymore, and scratching where it don't itch. And I decided I'm ready to go independent, and took that major leap of faith 18 years ago and jumped out on my own. So, and in my career now, again, it's 40 years plus. I've overseen and launched a myriad of different magazines, books, all of that. And again, got to the point 4 years ago where I was able to start teaching journalism to the next generation of journalists.
So, which company was your stepping stone? Was it Xerox? I know you worked with Xerox too.
Xerox was my first company out of college. And remember, I was a journalism major.
Yeah.
Here again is where corporate America at the time was really in search of African Americans. And they looked for a certain profile, and I knew I could fit that profile, even though they weren't looking for writers. Xerox was a copier company.
Right.
But my roommate at the time, he was a year older than I was. He graduated a year prior than I did. He went to work for Xerox. He was a business major, so he went to work for Xerox, and he was making incredible money back then. This was early 80s, mid 80s maybe. When I came out of college, I was offered a job by a local newspaper, San Jose Mercury News. I'll give them some credit here. But they only offered me about $13,000 a year. Well, my roommate was making about $47,000 selling copiers. So, I still like nice clothes and pretty cars and keeping up with the girls. So I decided I'm going to work for Xerox. I knew I fit the profile. I knew they were looking for folks just like me. And I went and worked for Xerox for a couple, 3 years, which was a very, very smart decision. And this is ultimately what helped develop me as a publisher. This is how at times in retrospect, you can look at hindsight and see how God was raising you up, how he was bringing you up. He took me from my comfort zone, which was journalism. Remember, I just wanted to be a writer in a cubicle,
Yeah.
to cold calling now businesses on a regular basis, knocking on doors and dealing with rejection and everything else. Well, in the publishing industry, the business of publishing is both content and revenue, right? So the content is where your writers are, but your revenue streams, your income streams are things like advertising, subscription, circulation, distribution. Well, Xerox their training is phenomenal. They trained me on how to sell, how to deal with people, how to understand marketing and strategy in that regard. So when I ultimately got back into journalism as a writer again, I now was equipped with understanding business, the metrics of how to generate revenue and income, and then I evolved into a pretty big league publisher, knowing both of those things pretty well.
Yeah. You brought up marketing, and that is the key nowadays is marketing. What are the do's and don'ts in marketing for, I know it's a generic question, each business market different, but what are the basic do's and don'ts for marketing when you start off with your business?
Well, I first would recommend anyone who's deciding to go into business for themselves to go take a class or two. I mean, if you're in a situation where you're inheriting a business or you're second generation in business, that you probably learned by hard knocks, right? You were going to the company with your parents, or to the store, or to the restaurant with your parents, or doing the landscaping with your dad, and that's how you kind of learn the business. But I'd always recommend anyone, if you can, go get yourself at least a little training. Just go take some business courses, community college courses. That'll be helpful. And then you've got agencies around the cities now who help people launch small businesses. But so get as much training as you can. But fundamentally, you gotta get your business registered, whether it's sole proprietor, some sort of DBA, LLC, so S corporation, C corporation, and then you've got to open your doors, right? Let's first, and I probably need to take a half a step back. Let's hope that you're going to be doing something that you have a real passion for, that you really, really enjoy, whatever it is. making potato salad, bean pies, publishing books, writing books, um, DJ, radio DJ, music DJ. You have a real passion for it. So you enjoy it so much you would do it for free, but you got to make a living. So you got to turn it into a business, right? Well, go get your education first. And again, it doesn't have to be anything formal. I'm not talking about going and registering for college. Just go get some kind of training so that you don't just jump into the deep end and hurt yourself. But once you're in and you've got your business cards, nowadays you need a website, phone number, some sort of social media presence. You got all that kind of stuff set up. The next big thing I'd say, and it's so undervalued, by the way, with small businesses, a lot of people put as much as they can into research and development, right? Trying to perfect their product and come up with the best mousetrap. But they still don't value, in my opinion, marketing. Because if you are not broadcasting what you do to a myriad of people, now you can have a niche business, right? Because even a church is kind of a niche business, but you still got to bring followers and you need new business. You're going to always need more people to replace people who come and go. But you've got to make sure that you are always voicing your business, talking about it, doing networking. Those are some of the organic, what I call guerrilla marketing things, network.
Oh, I look like his screen froze. Let's wait a few, see it come back on. We were asking about marketing and stuff, and that is a key right now. You got to have a marketing team. And what he was saying that definitely take some business classes. You don't have to go to college, but take some business classes so you know if you're going the right direction. And like you said, get your DBA, your LLC, get all that together, and you'll be all set. So he'll probably sign back on in a few minutes. So we'll just hold up and wait for him. Uh, Marketing is one thing that we all need to do. And it's not that easy sometimes. It's a lot of work into marketing. So we're just um with the marketing part, like for instance, I'm gonna brag on Horizon and more. Toya has a marketing team. Whatever goes out or anything, when I did some flyers and commercials for her, I mean, it's not even 30 seconds when I launch it. The marketing team is on it, spread it out all over the place. Present is known. So that's why Horizons More is really the premier night spot in San Antonio because of her marketing team getting things out there. And it's just a blessing how things are done. So we definitely have to do that. And the other question I was going to ask him about, but I hope he'll sign back on again. I was going to ask him what brought him here to San Antonio. And I know he's from California. That probably made Sandra feel real good. California A is in the house. So, but it's just he has been in business for a long time. He's a motivated speaker too. He gets up and speaks to everybody, tells them what motivation. You know, some people need that motivation in the morning, not just a cup of coffee. So people say when you go to a speaker that motivates you, he was telling you things that you didn't know that was inside you for you to think about it anymore. Like get up in the morning, look in the mirror, instead of having a bad attitude, say, I'm gonna have a great day. You got that one worker at work that no matter what, nothing's never right. It's always wrong. I had that almost every job I had. There's always somebody, I hate my job. I told them, why don't you just quit? I can't quit. My wife would be mad at me. Then learn how to go to program. Stop coming in complaining, being negative all the time. Oh, that's a good one right there. How many people you know that's negative on everything that's going on out there? No matter what, they're negative about it. Well, it's their upbringing. It was how they were brought up. That's all I can say. And being negative is not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. So you want to hang around with positive people in your group. Somebody that will boost you up and pick you up. Somebody you could talk to about that, and they give you positive reinforcements. Even though you're talking, oh, woe is me, and all this and all that. And then the main thing is, you're talking about the people that you got your haters that don't like what you're doing. It isn't they don't like what you're doing. They're mad because they can't do it, you know? And embrace your haters. Now you talking about marketing. That's part of your marketing team right there, your haters, because they're spreading the word. Yes, it's negative, they're spreading it, but how many people heard something about somebody said about somebody that's negative and curiosity set in and you wanted to know what it's all about, and they go to where you at, hear what you're saying, or go on your website, or better yet, go to your business and find out you're just the opposite of what that person said. So that's how you gotta look at things every once in a while. But you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna play a little music and we're gonna hoping that he'll chime back in. So let me see. Let me find something to play while we're waiting on Mr. Fisher to chime back in. Don't know what happened. He was right in the middle of marketing. It was sounding good. So let's just play a little music while we're waiting on him.